In my last video, I discussed how I experienced, dealt with, and now how I think about bullying. Today's video, while dealing with a similar topic, deals with a much harsher variety of bullying. Because it's so much more grim, I'd like to do two things right up front. The first one is a little privilege check. I grew up in a very stable household and broader community. I don't know how much my viewers know about Chapel Hill, North Carolina, but basically it's this very idyllic little southern college town. My sibling and I both went to private middle school, so that's the level of stability we're talking about. And as far as I can remember, there was only one incident of crime that ever took place in the neighborhood I grew up in, and that was these two guys riding around in their car, one of whom would hit mailboxes with a bat. And obviously that's super annoying and inexcusable, but it's the kind of vandalism that people do because they're bored, right? Not because they need money to pay for their HIV medicine. It's not the kind of crime where you'd ever feel like you were in danger. And all of that is to say that the kind of bullying that I experienced was less severe than it could have been, and also impacted me less because I had so many other things going for me. Which I mention because this video is going to be a lot more tonally grim than the last video. So if that's not something you want to deal with today, I would recommend putting this video off or maybe skipping it entirely. My original plan for this video was to read a whole bunch of books on the topic and then make one synthesis video about what I'd learned. However, after just one book, I found that I had pages and pages of notes, and it was go time. I think there's a decent chance I could just make an ongoing series out of this topic, reading up on different topics within bullying and then relaying my thoughts on the matter. So with this video being the first in that series, what book are we reviewing? The other day I finished Bullied to Death by Judith A. Yates. This book is a story of Cherokee Harriman and her experiences with trauma and bullying and mental illness and eventually bullycide, which is when somebody bullies you so badly that you take your own life. Before I begin with my thoughts on the content of this book, I'd actually like to take a brief detour and talk about how you determine whether a resource is credible. And let's start with the reason I decided to check the credibility of this book. There were a couple of things about this book that raised some red flags for me. Nothing that would make me dismiss it outright, but I had my concerns. First, this book has a lot of typos. Just little things, like on page 221, September 5th, 2015, comma, was like any other Saturday morning in Cherokee's home. That second comma after 2015 doesn't need to be there. And because I found little things like this all throughout the text, not necessarily changing the meaning of the text, but definitely there, the kind of thing that an editor might catch, it did make me question who the publisher of this book was. And second, and this is the bigger issue, there are a couple of moments where the author just blatantly makes things up. Cherokee giggled, feeling as if she had a huge secret that no one else knew. If anyone found out, they might be shocked. Clutching her cell phone in one hand, she ducked down the hall and into the bathroom, shutting the door behind her and turning the lock softly. How does Yates know that Cherokee did any of this? By definition, Cherokee was keeping it a secret, and it's not like she was around to do an interview with the author after the fact. Again, this raises some questions, this time regarding the credibility of the author. With these concerns in mind, I began my investigation. The first thing I did was check the publisher. The gold standard for any nonfiction would be a university press because it relies on the peer review model. The next level down is going to be the popular press. And just because a book isn't peer reviewed doesn't make it automatically bad or worthless. It can raise questions if somebody who really ought to be publishing through university press is instead publishing through popular press. It makes it look like, oh, this professor, weirdly enough, can't get his stuff through peer review process. But especially if you're a professional or another kind of nonfiction writer, again, that's not necessarily the case. The main thing that the popular press has going for it is money. You get access to editors, you can publish your books with color photos, that kind of thing. And then one step down from there, you have smaller publishers. These tend to have a laser focus on one kind of book that they publish. Maybe they're a romance mill, or they do early education readers, and that's it. And then finally we have self-published. This is the lowest barrier to entry and also the cheapest to get out there. Typically, these are going to be print on demand or ebook only. And in addition to having the least barriers to publication, they also have the fewest resources to spruce up your text and make sure that everything is where it needs to be. So if something isn't edited very well, it makes me think that it's self-published, and I don't know what kind of credibility I can ascribe to a book like that. And that's where I thought, based on the typos, this book was going to be, but it was actually published by Wild Blue Press, so it has a publisher. I looked up what kind of books they tend to publish, and it's a lot of horror, a lot of mystery, a lot of true crime, a lot of thrillers. So we're definitely talking more spectacle than scholarly literature. A lot more true crime rather than criminology. My next step in researching the credibility of this book was to look at the author herself. So I went to her website, and this is where things started to get weird. Let's read her biographical section together. Criminologist Judith A. Yates has appeared as a guest speaker, lecturer, and instructor for organizations across the United States for almost 30 years, to include Dr. Henry C. Lee's Markle Symposium, Texas Association of Licensed Investigators, Tennessee Correction Association, and the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Her resume lists loss prevention, it doesn't say where, the Sheriff's Department, it doesn't say in what role, the federal prison system, minimum to maximum, male and female, again, it doesn't say what she was doing there, investigations, it doesn't say what type, and criminal justice professor instructor. And this is the bit that gave me pause. If she is a professor, why doesn't it list the university where she is a professor? And why doesn't it list the universities where she got her degrees? Since this section is all about bolstering her qualifications, it would seem like her university affiliations would be low-hanging fruit. Well, I ran a second search specifically for her education, and this time I was brought to the publisher's website. The website quotes her as saying, "In 1991, in undergraduate school, I enrolled in a class called Introduction to Criminal Justice. Fast forward, and I became an instructor for the same class." That's a lot of fast forwarding, and I still don't know why she doesn't list her academic credentials. Next, I checked her LinkedIn, where I found that she has earned several relevant degrees. She earned a BA from Midwestern University in criminal justice. She earned an MA from Kaplan University in criminal justice, and is currently working on a PhD from Capella University, also in criminal justice. Why then doesn't she list these on her website and on her publisher's website? I don't know. It could be the fact that both of her graduate institutions are for-profit universities, which generally don't have the best reputation, although they are both accredited, so it's not like her master's and her PhD aren't going to be masters and PhD. So with that research out of the way, I'm going to return to the text of the book one last time. Before we looked at the editing and the polish on the book, now I want to look at the content itself. There were a couple of things I noticed which indicated this book's level of academic rigor. First, this book has footnotes, but it doesn't have very many. In this whole 300-page book, it has 24 footnotes. That's one footnote for every 6 pages. And then there's the references section. In previous videos, I've shown you guys references sections that are a quarter or a third of the entire book. This one is 4 pages long. And then second, and this is contrary to popular belief, but if you're writing nonfiction, you don't want to just give the facts. If you're a subject matter expert, you want to give your audience the facts plus a way of understanding the facts. Essentially, that's why education and degrees and academic disciplines are also important, because you get a different analysis from somebody who's actually a content expert as compared to somebody who just knows a list of facts, right? One is the list of facts, and then the other one is how do you understand those facts? And credit where it's due. There is a section towards the end where Yates goes over a bunch of other cases of bullycide and talks about what they have in common, and this is the kind of perspective that a content expert can bring to the subject matter. But this is something that you see in brief bursts rather than overarching throughout this work. For example, this book does not have a thesis statement to tie it all together. From beginning to end, Yates gives you facts, but does not build to anything. And to be clear, a thesis statement does not have to be as blunt as the teens were innocent or the teens were guilty. I actually think that would be a really banal dichotomy to dedicate an entire book to. What I am talking about is, here is what this case study says about society, or here's what this case study says about mental illness, or how about here's what this case study tells us about bullying. We've got this meticulously researched case study here. We should use it to build to something. So how reputable is this book? I think that to the extent that I trust the research, yes, I do think it's reputable. I do not think that Judith Yates is just lying to us. And there are several points where she says, I can't tell you this, or nobody knows this. So except for a couple of vignettes where she's obviously making stuff up, I'm inclined to believe the facts of this book. However, I do not trust this book as a scholarly argument. And I've got to say, that was one of the things that I found frustrating about this book, because there were several points where I thought that Yates was about to do just that. So what I'd like to do in the second half of this video is to pull a few quotes that I found particularly interesting and interrogate them to see if we can use the death of Cherokee Harriman to learn something about bullying. The closest thing that I could find to a thesis statement in this book was the argument between teens was not the singular reason, but a variable in Cherokee's suicide. One of Cherokee's friends says now, if they hadn't have hit that last button, maybe Cherokee wouldn't have done it. And this isn't wrong per se, but it also doesn't tell you much about bullying or how to prevent it. Saying that bullying was one reason out of many, or even that bullying was the last reason in a long list, ignores the relationship between bullying and all those other reasons. Saying that if those kids hadn't pushed her last button, maybe she'd still be here, makes it seem like an accident, like they happened to pick on the wrong kid on the wrong day. However, the evidence that Yates puts forth in this book supports a much more pointed claim. I'm now going to make the case, using this book as my main resource in doing so, that bullying is a targeted act against people who are socially and emotionally vulnerable to said aggression. And because that's the case, and because that's the nature of bullying, those who bully are responsible for what happens as a result of their targeted harassment campaign against these other people. And if this is a student or if this is a workplace situation, then not only are the bullies at fault, but also the teachers or the guardians or managers or whoever is allowing this to happen is also complicit in it happening, because they were supposed to be responsible for the well-being of the people who were in their care. One of the themes that Yates puts forward in this book is that of friendship and socialization. Essentially, in order to be healthy, you have to have people in your life. As Yates states, having and keeping friends was another of Cherokee's struggles. Cherokee did not have the social skills nor the understanding that to have a friend you had to follow rules set forth in society, and she did not understand the unspoken rules that were part of the teenage vernacular. She believed childish behavior would help get what she wanted, but acted too old for her age when it came to dating. She was caught in that zone of time where she was no longer a baby, but nowhere near being mature. As the other kids started developing new social skills, coping mechanisms, and problem-solving skills, Cherokee wasn't developing at the same rate. She was immature for her age, and the other kids didn't want to hang out with somebody like that. And as I read this, I was reminded of behavior that I've seen in other cases too, specifically that of Michelle Carter. You might know her story already from The Girl from Plainville, but as a quick recap of who she is, Michelle was on vacation with her family when she met Conrad Roy. It turns out they only lived like an hour apart from each other, so when they went home, they kept texting each other, they connected really well, and this is something that Michelle didn't have a lot of in her life, so on and off for a couple of years, they kept texting each other, they dated on and off, and then when Conrad commits suicide and they were looking through all of his possessions, looking for what happened, why it happened, they found his texts with Michelle, and it turns out that she was egging him on and telling him to get back in the car, and basically she had walked him through the steps of. And so her phone ended up getting subpoenaed as well. And so we don't just have the text between her and Conrad, we also have the text between her and everybody else. And again, we have this pattern of her trying to get attention, not from pro-social, hey, do you want to hang out? Hey, have you seen this movie? Hey, do you want to blah, blah, blah? No, a lot of trying to get people's attention, specifically trying to get their sympathy every time a bad thing happens or every time a neutral thing happens. She'll spin it and she'll say, things are crazy for me right now, and people would text her back, oh, I'm so sorry that you're going through this, but she didn't get these strong social relationships with anybody. You know, all she got was this pity response. And even though this led to completely opposite problems, it comes from the same problem. They didn't have the social skills to maintain strong friendships, so they blamed everyone around them for their loneliness. But that's not how it works. If other people don't want to hang out with you, it's a bummer, but ultimately, it's up to you to work on yourself and get yourself to where you need to be for other people to want to spend time with you. Learn to calm yourself, go to therapy, pick up a hobby. And if you have a kid that's being bullied, resist the urge to stop at blaming the other kids. Are the bullies the problem? Yes. Should they be being mean to your kid? No. Should we do something about them? Yes. Comma, but it's only half of the equation. You can't stop at punishing the other kids. You also have to help your kid develop the social skills to get a social network so that they're going to be more resilient the next time something like this happens, because we all deal with these sorts of things all the time, and one of the big things that helps us get through them is being resilient to them. And the biggest thing that you can do in order to be resilient is to have people to fall back on. Why do you care what the haters and losers say when you have a strong social network of your own, right? Who are going to support you and back you, and the way that you do that is by understanding social rules, and if your kid is struggling with that, help them. Often, basic immaturity and a lack of social skills is going to be the thing to get in a kid's way. But sometimes it's not as simple as that. There are often one or more root causes when it comes to behavioral problems, such as a behavioral disorder, past traumas, a mental handicap, being neurodivergent. Often kids don't want to spend time with the kid who doesn't have any social skills. So as a result, what happens is the kids who are a little bit behind socially end up not having the opportunity to practice their social skills, and they fall behind even further. And that's if the bullying is just passive. If the bullying is active and abusive, then it compounds the trauma. This is true both if you're at school or if you have a domestic abuse situation, and this is the environment the Cherokee grew up in. And as just one example, Yates writes, Heather and her siblings, Heather is Cherokee's mom, but Cherokee actually grew up in the same household. It's complicated. Heather and her siblings still remain confused over their relationships with their parents. Like thousands of dysfunctional families in the country, they loved one another as fiercely as they despised each other. As in so many abusive homes, the children wanted to run away from their parents as much as they needed to run into the arms of the same people who abused them. Everyone was just trying to survive day by day, using what little they knew as a compass. Yates doesn't use the term disorganized disorganized attachment, but that is essentially what we're seeing here. According to attachment theory, there are 4 kinds of attachments that a kid might develop with their parents, and those are secure, anxious, avoidant, and fearful. These 4 can be organized on 2 axes, with one axis being how strong your connection is with your parent, and then the other axis being whether or not it's a positive or a negative relationship you have with your parent. Disorganized attachment is, as we see in this section here, when you're in an abusive situation and the person will hurt you, but they're also the place where you go when you need comfort. And this isn't just common in child-parent relationships, but also between any kind of abuse situation. The person that you need and love is the person that hurts you. When a child experiences something like this, it's called an adverse childhood experience, or an ACE. If you have a whole bunch of ACEs, each one of those chips away at your resiliency, and it makes it harder for you to develop beyond that, especially if the ACEs happened when you were very young. Cherokee experienced a lot of ACEs, things like poverty, mom's new boyfriend, if you catch my drift. She also lost her primary caretaker several times. She lost her mom, she lost her grandpa, she lost her dad to her dad being in prison. And then there was an incident where a fire took their home. So there was just a lot of ACEs that just, chipped away at her ability to bounce back. Because after a certain point, when you're that young and that's all you've experienced, you just don't develop that level of trust that a good situation and a normal situation are ever going to actually be the same situation. Add all of this now to her various behavioral and mental health issues, and this girl had a really hard time making and keeping friends. Even if she knows there's a social script, she's going to have a much harder time learning it and following it, or even practicing it. With that established now, let's return to Yates's thesis. Yates posits that bullying is often one cause of bullycide, in addition to a whole slew of other issues. However, I don't think that she goes nearly far enough into cause and effect. Bullies tend to go after kids who have a lot of different things going on, right? They go after the poor, anxious, borderline personality disorder kids who have an eating disorder and a disorganized attachment to their parents. Saying that bullying is often the straw that breaks the camel's back ignores the fact that they don't bully everyone equally, they target these kids. Yates says, in Cherokee Harriman's case, Willard explains, the reason she was bullied all along and failing in school is that when stressed, she triggered. Her peers found her an easy target and fun to bully because she would overreact. The trauma primed her brain to overreact to danger or threat. That is what the brain naturally does, but much more if a kid has experienced early trauma. Kids who come from stable homes and have access to good nutrition and therapy and new clothes and hygiene might get bullied, but they don't trigger in the same way that Cherokee Harriman did. And because of that, they're not fun if you're a blood psychopath to bully. Resultantly, kids like this who have a lot of other things going for them do not get bullied as frequently or as severely, and when they do, they have a much easier time bouncing back from it. So saying that bullying is just one factor ignores this essential link, this significant overlap between kids who are getting targeted for bullying and being high risk for overreaction when they are bullied, such as self-harm. When I brought up this video to my mom, she mentioned that it reminded her of a phenomenon among herd animals, that when one of them gets sick or injured, the rest of the herd just kind of moves on without them, leaving them to get eaten by the wolf. And this makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. If you're a herd animal, if you're an herbivore, you can't take care of this deer who broke its leg, right? You don't have medicine. The best you can do is to run away and let the wolf eat the deer that's already hurt, and maybe the rest of you can survive long enough to breed another season, right? But the more that I thought about this, the less that it lined up. For starters, deer and wolves are two different species, whereas targets and bullies are all human beings. To really underline the absurdly antisocial levels that bullying reaches, let's imagine that a deer is walking through some brambles and gets a scrape on one of its legs, and he tries to follow the herd only for one of them to turn around and kick him. And he tries to follow the herd and another one turns around and bites him. And then he tries to follow the herd and then somebody else pushes him over. That's what bullying is like, right? Just because he got scratched on some brambles doesn't make him a defective deer, but every time they bite and kick him, he gets less able to keep up with the herd. And then the other thing that I want to mention is that wolves have to eat. They're carnivores, they've got to eat someone. But bullies don't have to bully, right? It's not a matter of survival. It's just being mean. Now, there is exactly one situation where this kind of behavior between bullies and bullied would make sense to me as some kind of evolutionary psychology behaviorist phenomenon. If somebody in the herd had some kind of contagious disease and you're a deer, so you can't like do medicine, let's say one deer gets rabies, and then everyone's like, whoa, dude, you're acting really weird, you've got to not hang out with us anymore. You might actually be protecting the herd. But I didn't want to assume, so I did some research. I searched for homicidal tendencies within different mammal species, and I found an article which compared mammals of all types to each other to see which species were most likely to kill another member of their species. And after comparing hundreds of kinds of mammals, they found that there were two variables that were most likely to have one member of a species kill another member of that species. The first one is if that species was particularly territorial. You know, this is my space, and if you come in here, I'm gonna hurt you, right? That's pretty self-explanatory. The second kind was if they were a social species. The more social you are, the more likely you are going to be to kill somebody else of your species. And this sounds counterintuitive on the face of it, but consider the issue of access. If you're a loner, if you rarely see anybody of your species, you don't have them around to hurt them, right? Whereas if you've got 20 people in your little, I don't know, guerrilla troop, they're right there. Now it comes to my attention that human beings are both highly social and highly territorial, making us highly dangerous to our own. Cherokee Harriman was part of the out group. She did not have the support nor the social skills to create an in-group of her own. They targeted her, not some well-adjusted kid who could handle it, but her because she would react. And let's not forget that those reactions were symptoms showing that she could not handle the stress that they were putting her under. And they got joy and entertainment from it, in the same way that a psychopath might get entertainment by poking a puppy with a stick to watch it whine and twitch. It was incidental that Cherokee was the one to be bullied to death, but it was inevitable that this group were going to find somebody to target who would react the way that they wanted and harass them until they couldn't take it anymore and inevitably push them too far for the sake of their own amusement. That's how it works. Cherokee happened to be vulnerable to that kind of abuse, but it could have happened to anybody in that position. So to bring this back to Yeats's original argument, it doesn't make sense to say that bullying is just one contributing factor when bullies are so careful in picking their targets. What's more is that the solution that Yeats recommends only makes sense if you understand bullying in these terms. Ultimately, the cycle has to be broken. It might seem like a hopeless situation since bullying is so resistant to reform, but there are certain measures we can take to combat it. Understanding the underlying social and antisocial phenomena that lead to bullying can help us understand how to prevent it. For example, if people bully those that they consider other, then you need to draw their attention to what they're doing. Yeats describes one potential program would create dialogue between the bullied and the bullies that is monitored by a respected adult. Rather than hearing an adult's lecture, children would be listening to their peers. Such a program would allow the bullied students to express feelings, to ask the bully why. Then the bully would be allowed to do the same. If it is a group of bullies, allow them to have open communication together, asking the same question of one another and discussing why they're being hurtful. Valuable lessons would be learned in such a program: good communication, understanding oneself, understanding others, and respect. I really like this approach because it proposes a social solution to an antisocial problem. Really, my only note for this section would be that it would be part of a much more pointed and cohesive argument if it had been written with all of the other stuff we've been talking about in mind. So, what was the point of all of this? Why go through so much trouble to basically rearrange a couple of passages? Ultimately, it's because I think it's important to be precise when presenting information in a cause-effect format. Yeats tends to use language which flattens the issue, rather than injecting the subject with nuance. It might seem like a subtle distinction, but the latter allows us to ask questions like, how does a bully pick their target, and even, why does a bully bully? In order to make meaningful strides towards solutions, we have to be meticulously careful in how we talk about the issue and unafraid of voicing difficult truths. Thank you for watching my second video on bullying. If you like the kind of content I make, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, like this video, and drop a comment down below.